And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is November the 7th, 311th day of the year. Just 54 days remain to the year's over with. And we get to start a new year. Holidays and observances. National Hug-a-Bear Day. Cuddle up with your favorite teddy bear. Relive childhood memories. Maybe throw a picnic for the whole family and your stuffed companions. Gumboot Friday. National Jersey Day. Love Your Lawyer Day. National Bittersweet Chocolate with Almonds Day. National Retinal Day. Notary Public Day. National Programmatic Advertising Day. National Canine Lymphoma Awareness Day. Fountain Pen Day. International Day of Medical Physics. National Medical Science Liaison Awareness Appreciation Day. National Jersey Friday. International Merlot Day. National Cancer Awareness Day. Children's Book Week. I've been reading a book a day since I was old enough to carry one. National Medical Cannabis Week, Marzipan Week, Rad Tech Week, National Animal Shelter Appreciation Week, National Book Award Week, Drowsy Driving Prevention Week, Pomegranate Festival, Artes Mundi, National Patient Transport Week, National Fig Week, Polar Bear Week, World Communication Week, Cuckoo Dancing Week, Great British Game Week, Talk Money Week, Number Confidence Week. Famous people born on this date? Adam Devine. Well, let's see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something going on. Well, First Lady Melania Trump caps Fox National Patriot Awards with top honor for service and leadership. Erica Kirk receives an inaugural Legacy Award honoring her late husband at the Patriot Awards. Benjamin Hall unveils the Honor Award at the Patriot Awards and shares his own story about survival. And Senate Republicans develop new funding plan to end the historic government shutdown. This is the longest one in history. Democrats left-wing candidate who lashed out at a GOP senator with death threats failed to win his local race. It was Helena, Montana city commissioner candidate who made headlines for lobbing threats and wishing a painful cancer death on Senator Tom Sheehy, Republican of Montana. An expletive-filled voicemail failed to crack the threshold of the top two candidates. Haley McKnight made national headlines earlier this week with after the audio of her voicemail she left for the senator in July came to light. It came from over the summer, shortly after Sheehy voted with his Republican colleagues to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That was a sweeping tax and spending package from Republicans that angered a lot of Democrats, including McKnight. So when in doubt, leave a voicemail giving death threats. That always works. Well, State Department has revoked more than 80,000 non-immigrant visas this year, including 8,000 student visas. The Trump administration has rescinded tens of thousands of non-immigrant visas since January, pointing to criminal activity as the primary reason. State Department announced on Thursday that 80,000 visas have been revoked this year, noting this is more than twice the number revoked last year. And more than 8,000 student visas were among those affected. That's going to make it difficult to get to class on time. Well, military personnel fell sick after a suspicious package was opened at Joint Base Andrews. That's actually the home to Air Force One. Several people are ill. Base medical personnel responded immediately and treated multiple individuals who reported feeling sick All the patients were listed in stable condition and later released. And as a precaution, the building and connecting building were evacuated and a cordon was established around the area, according to a spokesperson. Joint Base Andrews first responders were dispatched to the scene, determined that there were no immediate threats, and normal operations have since resumed. Of course, there's an investigation currently ongoing. Delaware mayor blames Philadelphia program for busing homeless populations to his city. The Wilmington, Delaware mayor John Kamey blamed Philadelphia for the rise of homelessness in his city. During a press conference last week, that's Mayor John Carney. He announced new measures to tackle the homelessness crisis, including designating Christina Park as a place for unhoused individuals to go to sleep. And he leveled most of the blame on the other cities and states that have been busing their homeless population into his city. Singled out Philadelphia for its Stranded Traveler Assistance Program, which provides taxpayer-funded bus tickets for homeless residents to go to any city in the country, as long as it's not there. He said it's just not right for these other places, cities and towns, sending their people to Wilmington. Constant influx from other cities and towns makes it harder for us to care for the population here, and most importantly, it's unfair to the city residents who live in these neighborhoods. He'd previously written to Philadelphia Mayor Chanel Parker in May about her Kensington Community Revival Program, which aimed to clear an open-air drug market in the Kensington area. In the time I lived in California, I saw a lot of areas just overrun with homeless. I made a trip to San Francisco, and first time I'd seen people sleeping in doorways. Well, Chinese nationals have been accused of smuggling biological materials while at a university laboratory. The Zubai, 28, Fingfang Zhang, 27, and Zhong Zhang, 30, charged on Wednesday after allegedly making false statements to U.S. Customs and Border Protection in order to import materials that were related to roundworms sent from China under the cover of research at the University of Michigan. That's according to prosecutors. The 3 Chinese nationals have been charged with conspiring to smuggle biological materials into the U.S. while they were employees at a University of Michigan laboratory. Chinese nationals worked at the University of Michigan's Shanzhou laboratory. Ching Wan Han, who also previously worked at the laboratory, is earlier charged with smuggling and making false statements. She pled no contest before being removed from the U.S. After Han's removal from the U.S., the university launched an internal investigation. Bai, Zhang, and Zhang refused to cooperate with the investigation, were terminated, which made them eligible for deportation. They tried to board a flight to China October 16th from Kennedy International Airport when they were stopped for further inspection. A lot of things are coming to light now that we're not making an effort to cooperate with the cover-up. Well, Democrats did start the fire of socialism. Now they're afraid it's going to burn them up. They spent years flirting with socialism, firing up their base with the promise of equity, and now they're scared to look it in the eye. New York City sparkled on election night. The real shockwave was in the Democratic Party's war room. Democratic Socialist of America candidate Zohan Mamdani, the 34-year-old darling of the far left, shut down the race, capturing 50.4% of the vote and defeating both former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa in a second turnout of more than 2 million voters. He's the youngest mayor since 1892. Ran on extreme promises of higher taxes on millionaires, rent freezes, free child care, and a tolerance for a globalized intifada message that has sparked fear among the Jewish voters. We'll see how he works out. Well, MSNBC's risky rebrand to MS Now draws skepticism from branding experts. This ultra-liberal network's risky rebrand is starting to take shape. They're set to officially change its name to My Source News Opinion World, or MS Now, on November 15th. This rebranding comes after Comcast spun off its cable assets to a new company named Versant. Executives from both sides wanted to distance the progressive network from NBC News brand. Rebranding a legacy media giant like MSNBC to MS Now is a bold and risky move, according to experts. It's not just changing a name, it's shifting decades of perception, equity, and trust, as if they had any. Stripping away part of a name that carries decades of trust can feel to loyal viewers like shedding part of its identity. The part of the problem they're going to face is they're still bringing some of the same old liberal people with them. Like Rachel Maddow, for example. She told the New York Times she was initially annoyed by the name change, but now she says she's happy about it. So we'll see what comes of that, if anything. Well, the Mega Millions jackpot has jumped above $800 million. It'll make a nice Christmas present for somebody. Ryan Reynolds has sparked outrage in Minnesota with an insulting boxed wine comment. He got backlash this week after an interview about the launch of his boxed wine. It's called Ugly Estates, which is being sold exclusively in Minnesota. He insulted some people in the land of 10,000 lakes by referring to it as an underdog state and suggesting it doesn't have the same cultured sensibilities as the East Coast. You want to go to places that will get it, he told the Minnesota Star Tribune in a piece published on Monday. He said, I don't think Martha's Vineyard is going to really embrace this the way Minnesota might. And although the wine does come from California, the fact that it's boxed rather than bottled made Reynolds believe the Midwesterners might have the right sense of humor for it. Maybe yes, maybe no. Well, Kendall Jenner has shared nude beach photos as the Kardashian family gathers for her 30th birthday trip. She's really embracing her 30s, according to her comments. Took to Instagram to share a carousel of images from her tropical birthday getaway, attended by several members of her famous family. She celebrated turning 30. The supermodel shared a series of images, including nude shots of herself. In one, she sits facing the ocean while sitting nude on the beach and looking out toward the water. In another, she's holding a book, How to Carry Water, selected poems of Lucille Clifton, over her chest while lying topless in a hammock. Well, the Kardashians and the Jenners have long had a reputation that nothing is too wild. Well, lawmakers revive a major century-old offer to Virginians as Spanberger and Jones are set to take office. West Virginia lawmakers at the state and federal levels are looking to welcome the disaffected Virginians into mountaineer country after Democrats swept elections this week with Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger and Attorney General-elect Jay Jones winning big. Virginia and West Virginia were a unified state till June of 1863 when the ultimate result of the Wheeling Convention saw delegates in western counties vote to split from the east to prevent forcibly seceding from the U.S. That effort percolated in Richmond. That split may be mending after West Virginia lawmaker announced plans Thursday to invite several Western Virginia counties and those in Maryland's western panhandle to join West Virginia. A lot of unhappy people. Well, a man on parole with a violent criminal history stabbed a teen to death at Walmart. Man's previously convicted of a violent crime, and he's accused of killing a teenager at a Walmart in Georgia. Officials in Savannah, Georgia, said 48-year-old Delano Middleton stabbed J.T. Schroeder, 18, October 23rd, at a Walmart. The 18-year-old was stabbed during an altercation at the Walmart location, according to the Chatham County Police Department. Died 4 days later. Middleton was charged with murder in the stabbing. According to WTOC, police alleged that Schroeder kicked Middleton's shopping cart. According to the outlet, the Middleton also stabbed a woman several times 4 years ago. Well, he can't plead being a minor, so they'll probably just decide he's had such a poor upbringing he didn't understand that murdering somebody was bad. Well, key Trump allies jumped in a New York governor's race days after the shocking Mamdani mayoral victory. Representative Elise Stefanik on Friday launched her long-anticipated Republican campaign for New York governor. She's challenging Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul. Stefanik, top House Republican, one of former President Trump's closest allies, represents a conservative-leaning district in upstate New York, been weighing a gubernatorial run for several months. I said former President Trump. He was former, and now he's the current president. According to Stefanik, it'll be very, very soon, and people are very excited. She said during an interview on Fox News, the story with Martha McCallum. And hours later in a statement, she declared, "I'm running for governor to bring a new generation of leadership to Albany to make New York affordable and safe for families all across our great state." We'll see if she can unseat Hochul. Secretary of War Hexeth warns drug traffickers after another deadly drug boat strike. "We will kill you." As President Trump intensifies his administration's war on drugs through direct military action at the sea, Secretary of War Hexeth announced another deadly strike on Thursday. In a post on X, he said the U.S. military strike killed 3 men aboard that vessel, which he described as operated by a designated terrorist organization. He said today, at the direction of President Trump, the Department of War carried out a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel operated by a designated terrorist organization. They might get the idea that drug smuggling can be very dangerous. Well, there's been a new study showing there's a higher stroke risk linked to consuming certain amounts of alcohol. Pouring a third drink can mean trouble for your brain. Harvard researchers have found that people who drink 3 or 4 alcoholic drinks in a day may suffer a stroke more than a decade earlier than people who drink less. This research, published this week in the Neurology, the medical journal of the American Academy of Neurology, links heavy drinking to not just earlier strokes, but also larger, deadlier brain bleeds and long-term brain damage. The study analyzed data from 1,600 adults averaging 75 years of age who were hospitalized for cerebral hemorrhage, type of stroke caused by bleeding inside the brain. During their hospital stays, participants were asked about their drinking habits, either directly or through family members. Well, let's see. There's a lot of flash sales at Walmart online. Oreo's Thanksgiving-themed cookies fly off the shelves as some fans call them cursed. The new Oreo offering has some fans more than ready to feast. Cookie Company released a new Thanksgiving dinner-inspired cookie collection with the flavors turkey and gravy, sweet potato, creamed corn, apple caramel pie, pumpkin pie, and cranberry sauce. They got released October 29th. Limited edition sandwich cookies are available only on the Oreo website and retail for $19.99. Sold out just a week after they were listed. 12-pack of cookies, which was covered in flavored fudge, was part of an experimental test and learn release in which Oreo sought honest feedback from fans. Fans instantly took sides once Oreo unveiled the new flavors on Instagram. $19.99 for 12 cookies, that's a little steep in my humble opinion. Well, Nancy Pelosi's retiring. She's going to take her $120 million and go sit in the sun. Talk about how if she was in charge, things would be different. Well, Meghan Markle's Hollywood comeback may backfire as Vanity movie sparks palace scrutiny. She's ready to become a star again. Duchess of Sussex has returned to acting for the first time since she married Britain's Prince Harry in 2018. Sun reported the Suits alumni was spotted on the set of the upcoming Amazon MGM Studios film Close Personal Friends. She's expected to play herself. Movie stars Brie Larson, Lily Collins, and Jack Wade. She's always thought she should be the center of attention, and now she can do it again. James Carville says he's bet money Democrats are going to win the presidency in 2028 and impact the Supreme Court. How does he know? He just does, because he's a Democrat, don't you know? As Carville and his co-host Al Hunt took questions on Thursday's episode of Politics War Room, one inquired of what could have been done during Biden's presidency to prepare for the possibility of Trump winning a second term. While Hunt argued that new laws and guardrails wouldn't have made much of a difference, Carville outlined how the next Democratic president could wield power differently from the predecessors. He said, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Democrats going to win in 2028. You know that. I know that. Democratic president's going to announce a special transition advisory committee on the reform of the Supreme Court. Yes, it's going to be a Garden of Eden with a Democrat back in office. ICE says it took down a group linked to a violent home invasion group in Texas. Video shows victim being chased and attacked. Federal agents captured members of a South American theft ring believed to be in the U.S. illegally. They attacked families in a series of violent armed break-ins across Texas. According to the agency, the group targeted small business owners across the Lone Star State. In one incident, video shows two masked men holding handguns chasing a screaming resident around his house. Victims seen being hit by the suspects. And now 4 suspects have been federally indicted in connection with the break-ins and 2 have been convicted. The group is believed to be members of the South American Theft Group, organized network of foreign nationals, primarily from South America. They travel through the U.S., targeting wealthy homes and businesses by committing burglaries and thefts. They use encrypted messaging apps, burner phones, and pre-surveillance of the neighborhood to identify and target victims. Items stolen include high-value jewelry and luxury watches and cash. So, it would appear they're starting to crack down on it. Well, Democrats are holding the government hostage over subsidies Americans don't want. Democrats are holding the government hostage in an extended government shutdown over temporary COVID-era Affordable Care Act subsidies that were meant to make health care cheaper or free for millions of Americans during the pandemic. But like most pandemic relics, the cost of these subsidies far outweighs any potential benefits. Democrats decided to extend it to everybody, legal or not. And the American people, the American voters, do not want that. Well, red states are inviting residents frustrated by the Democratic gains in Virginia and the Northeast to come to their states. Over $100 million has moved to Florida alone. And President Trump has announced a $35 billion Uzbekistan investment deal after meeting with Central Asian leaders. And liberal justices are fuming as the High Court has sided with Trump on transgender passport rules. Now it's going to state what your sex is on the passport. Well, on that note, let's talk about our topic. We've been talking about strange things in the great outdoors. We've been talking about a place in England called Cannock Chase. It has quite a bizarre history. And paranormal manifestations reported from Cannock Chase are not limited to just black-eyed girl ghosts and werewolves. Yes, there have been werewolves seen. Imagine driving along a lonely stretch of road next to Cannock Chase Woods. It's night. You come around a bend, see a woman standing in the middle of the road. You slam on the brakes and try not to hit her. As you come to a stop, she's still standing there. She's a tall woman, She's kind of a strange gray color. Seems to be naked, but you can't see any characteristics other than her long hair. Eyes are unusually large and dark, and her gaze is undisturbingly piercing, even downright hypnotic. Paralyzed against your own will, you feel almost as if her hypnotic gaze is violating your mind. Then, after a few moments of this staring contest, she turns and walks into the woods. As soon as she disappears, you're able to move again, and you get out of there as fast as you can. That was the experience of one woman as she cut through the Cannock Chase area after visiting a friend. Says she was tormented with nightmares about that mysterious woman for months after that incident. Well, put yourself in the place of a visitor passing through the Cannock Chase woods. You're walking by, enjoying the night air and the beauty of the trees, and you suddenly see the glimpse of two glowing eyes staring at you from deeper in the woods. You stop and you blink as the eyes seem to move closer, and you suddenly sense an evil presence. These eyes are bright red with a disturbing darkness to them at the same time. And you stare, almost hypnotized. You're finally able to discern the outline of the body, shape of a very large, muscular black dog with abnormally bulky ears. And it's coming closer every moment as you stare at it. It moves slowly and silently as it almost stalks you. Well, finally you have the presence of mind to turn on your heels and you run back toward the civilization. Afraid to look back as you have actually encountered what's known as the Hellhound of Cannock Chase. It seems something remains in the woods of Cannock Chase tied to the murder and sexual assault of 3 little girls. If you should ever visit that area of Staffordshire, England, and hear the screams of a small child, by all means, try to help. But you shouldn't be surprised if that small child you tried to rescue ends up scaring the woods out of you. And run from an encounter with a pair of luminous red eyes watching you from the trees, and hope that the hellhounds don't bite. Well, from Cannock Chase, let's go to Wychwood Forest in Oxfordshire, England. It was once a massive royal forest, but it's much reduced in size today. Its known history dates back to the Bronze Age, about 3000 BC. Beautiful forest is filled with deciduous trees and site of various Renaissance festivals and medieval reenactments. Furthermore, this ancient wood is home to many ghostly manifestations, and visitors find themselves filled with a sense of dread and overcome with terrible nausea. Now imagine, if you will, walking along a well-worn trail through Wychwood, surrounded on either side by dense, beautiful trees and serenaded by the sounds of native birds. Hear the occasional scampering of a squirrel, and gentle quietness pervades the atmosphere. And suddenly, that peace is broken by the sound of thundering, rapidly approaching hoofbeats. Step off the side of the trail, afraid you're going to be run over by a horse, but the sound passes and disappears without a single horse being in sight. This is said to be a common phenomenon in the Wychwood, but phantom horses are just one of the mysterious occurrences that take place in these woods. One of the classic ghost stories of the Wychwood involves Amy Robsart, unfortunate first wife of the Earl of Leicester, Robert Dudley, met a most untimely death after her neck was broken under very suspicious circumstances. After her death, or as the case may be, murder, her grieving spirit visited her husband as he hunted in the Wychwood. Unearthly spirit of Lady Robsart gave him a terrifying message from the beyond. She said in 10 days he would join her in death. 10 days later, he died after the sudden onset of a strange illness. A lot of folks believe this was the retribution from beyond the grave. And the story doesn't end there. It said anybody who encounters her ghost within the Wychwood is also going to die within 10 days. In short, it's not recommended to look for the ghost of Lady Robsart unless you've got a death wish. She's not a spirit anybody would want to have come haunt them. According to local legends, some of the elder and thorny plum trees contained within the witchwood are not really trees at all, but actually witches in disguise. The trees are notched or the bark is damaged, the sap leaking out said to be more consistent with human blood than with tree sap. The idea entities could be associated with the very trees is mysterious and uneasy for visitors. Also discourages most people from vandalizing the trees, don't you know? One tree within the confines of the forest is a bit different in its abnormality. Rumored to be a hanging tree in times past, making it the location of numerous executions by hanging. Those who visited that hanging tree have reported a strong feeling of dread and hopelessness, as well as a strong male presence. Whether that male presence is the ghost of a hanged man may never be known. Whoever he is, apparently his spirit is not very happy. You may have heard of the will-o'-the-wisp, jack-o'-lantern, or ignis fatuus. All names refer to unusual flickering lights in the English folklore. Often appearing over a bog or a swamp, these mysterious lights look like the flickering flame of a lamp and do confuse a lot of travelers. As you get closer to the light, it would recede, and if you pursue it, the light would eventually disappear and the traveler would often be hopelessly lost in the woods. In the witchwood, they often found themselves at the edge of a gaping chasm about to fall into a roaring river. Certain maliciousness seems to accompany this manifestation when it takes place in the witchwood. Well, while such manifestations occur all over the world, Europe has its own explanation, believing it to have a malevolent spirit behind them. Some deem these lights are actually lanterns, or in some cases a burning coal held by ghosts who have been doomed to wander swamps and bogs after committing some serious misdeed in life. Some say they're the ghosts of unbaptized children, including stillborn infants. It's also said many have been enjoying the peace and within Witchwood when they happen to encounter what appears to be a vintage horse-drawn cart with holding an older couple and two young children in the back, all dressed in period clothing. Children are sobbing mournfully as the chill passes through the visitors as the cart drives by. As they look back to take another look at the cart, they find it's completely disappeared. No place for it to have disappeared to. So quickly, and upon inspection of the path, this cart doesn't even leave tracks. The cart, including the sound of the chopping children, simply vanishes. In addition, a lot of visitors have felt unseen hands on their shoulders, either assuming it was the hands of one of their companions or startled because they're alone. Those touched whirl around quickly, expected to see somebody behind them, but they found out there's nobody there. Source of the touch remains a mystery. Some report it to be a light tap on the shoulder. Others insist it was a hostile, aggressive hand that grasped their shoulder tightly before letting go. Regardless of whether it was friendly or not, this ghostly touch is considered by most to be very unnerving. And if you should pay a visit to the Witchwood, just be careful about following any flickering lights that attract your attention at night, and don't talk to any ghostly ladies, or you might meet your death rather quickly. And be prepared to feel apprehensive, and don't be surprised if you feel like you're being followed. Other than that, enjoy the beauty of the woods. Just don't stay after dark. Well, from the Witchwoods, let's go to Ballybolly Forest in Larne, Northern Ireland. One thing sets Ballybolly Forest apart from the other haunted forest. Based on stone arrangements and circular trenches, this is an ancient Druid site. A lot of folks believe this primal forest is actually a gateway to another realm, and early Druids knew its secrets. Disturbing occurrences and sightings continue to occur to this day, making it a definite point of paranormal presence at work. Locals rarely venture inside the tree line, and those who do stay close to the paths. Even more interesting, some of the locals claim that these paths They're paths clean and free of all overgrowth without any human intervention. These paths are rarely used and considered tied in with the Druidic past of the forest. Over a span of 300 years, beginning in 1400, Ballyboley Forest was the site of many unexplained disappearances. People of various ages in life travel through or near the forest and literally vanish. When locals mount a search party, all they would find was an altar or an ancient-looking monument. Some still believe these disappearances were kidnappings tied to pagan worship or human sacrifices. The most recent disappearance was actually a cyclist in 2012. Visitors to this haunted wood have seen many disturbing things, including billows of jet black smoke appearing and disappearing without explanation or any sign of a fire. To make matters worse, the swirling smoke just isn't black. It seems to swallow up any light that comes near it. It spins and billows and whirls as if it was a sentient being as you stand in shock. Moments later, it disappears as quickly as it appeared, and the forest returns to its normal silence. Though the common sight in the Ballyboley forest is shadowy figures wandering through the woods during the night, reports of these date back to 1400s, about the time the disappearances first began. Some of these figures seem to be human in form, others are more animalistic in appearance. But none of the witnesses has ever had a clear view of these woodland wanderers. A lot of visitors to the forest have described shadowy figures spotted just inside the trees and sometimes accompanied by mysterious chants and unrecognizable language. Although the words may not be understood, the sound of the chant is unsettling and chilling. One evening, a group of teenagers were out in the Ballyboley forest on an overnight camping trip as part of a team-building exercise when they spotted people nearby. When they went to investigate, thinking it was a neighboring team lost in the woods, they didn't find anybody. Everything changed at about 9 p.m. when they saw a group of 4 figures approaching with lit torches made from tree branches. Young people were greatly unnerved as the figures drew closer and closer and then vanished from sight. As the mysterious quartet disappeared, they heard sounds like animals crying out. And there's one female ghost actually known for her horrific cries of pain. One particular incident, 2 men were walking through the forest on an old worn path, and they both heard strange sounds they described as the flapping of massive wings. They didn't see anything. They decided to just ignore the sound. A short time later, they heard a woman scream. Her cries and moans sounded as if she was in unbearable pain. They quickly left the well-traveled path they were on to offer assistance to whoever this pitiful woman might be. The search came to an abrupt end when they ran across a small stand of trees dripping with blood. In fact, there was so much blood present they could smell its coppery odor. They thought they might have stumbled upon some type of horrific human sacrifice. Others have heard the sound of animals crying out in pain as if they're being slaughtered or sacrificed. Neither the animals nor their remains have ever been found, just as the mysterious screaming lady has never actually been found. One man sensed they were being watched, and he slowly turned his head to look back in the direction they came from and saw a group of 4 figures standing in ragged brown robes and head coverings. They were standing motionless, and their hoods hid their faces. If they had faces, that is. He knew they weren't there moments before as they had passed by that area. Other man turned to look. Another piercing scream resounded nearby before their screams began to echo throughout the forest. A lot of folks believe those robed figures are actually ancient druids. And though they've been spotted numerous times, nobody seems to get a good look at their faces. Or if they have, they haven't lived to tell about it. Hoods always cover their shadowy faces, even their makeshift torches can't penetrate. Sometimes the sightings of the robed figures are also accompanied by the sounds of mysterious chants. Well, some describe this forest as being alive and having a personality that causes fear and distress and uneasiness. Animal sounds and screams are very common, and the sounds echoing through the forest have been described as similar to those you'd find at a slaughterhouse. Well, if you decide to venture inside Ballyboley Forest, be sure to stay on the marked trails. Remember, if you feel like something is watching you, something most likely is. You just hope whatever it is might be friendly. You don't want to become another disappearance or even a sacrifice in this beautiful, menacing forest. And from Ireland, let's go to Wales, Pembrey Woods in Carmarthenshire, Wales. Like many of the other woods and forests we've talked about, the Pembrey Woods has a long history dating back to at least 400 BC. There were remnants of several Iron Age forts in the area, those pottery dating back to the Romans. Still bears the marks of its 19th and 20th century military past, with concrete bunkers and underground rail lines abandoned but still present. Any area occupied for that many years is bound to have a ghost or two hanging around, and Pembrey Woods is no exception. Some strolling through the forest describe being grabbed by a pair of strong hands around the ankle, and that movement is so sudden they lose balance and fall heavily on the ground. Look around quickly for whoever attacked them, but there's nobody there, and there are no sounds of footsteps running away. This is what a lot of folks are calling the poltergeist of Pembrey Woods. Poltergeists are known for disturbing noises and throwing things around, of course. Others have been touched or shoved by this spirit, but that isn't all. Poltergeist reputation comes from what it does to overnight campers. A lot of campers have been woken up in the morning only to find their equipment and cooking utensils and pans thrown into the woods. During World War II, there was a Royal Air Force field near the woods, and a lot of planes damaged in battle crashed in the area. As a result, there are reports of RAF officers being sighted in the woods. Also been photographs taken within the woods that clearly show a man in an RAF uniform that's most definitely not there when the picture was taken. One disturbing story states if you lay eyes on the ghost of one airman in particular, you're going to die within a week of meeting him. Others believe these RAF officers are responsible for the numerous shadow people spotted in the woods. And of course, no discussion about Pembury Woods will be complete without a quick discussion of the infamous hatchet men. This is a term locals apply to a group of small-sized men who would lure ships away from safety and toward the coastline by hanging around the cliffs at night and swinging their lanterns back and forth as a signal to approaching ships the area was safe to land in. This coastline is littered with sharp rocks that are dangerous to ships. And once a ship's lured onto the cliffs and trapped on the rocky coast below, the men would attack the survivors with their hatchets. And once they were finished killing the crew, they'd loot the ships. This no doubt's the cause behind the sightings of numerous ghost ships in the area. These ships have been sighted with a crew on board that didn't look to be of this world. One ship in particular is a large galleon, replete with tattered sails, and it said to glow with an otherworldly green light. Others have spotted the tiny hatchetmen with their lanterns still wandering through the woods. Whether they're the ghosts of notorious robbers or not is, of course, a topic open to question. Strange lights are also seen within the woods and the surrounding area. Some locals believe these lights are the work of lingering hatchetmen spirits, and others, of course, disagree. Around dusk, a lot of locals and visitors have spotted people walking out from the ocean. And while this is not surprising, the fact they're wearing period clothing and strolling on top of the water rather than wading through is quite startling. Believed to be the ghost of individuals who drowned in shipwrecks or those who fell victim to the hatchetmen. Also, a gunpowder and ordnance factory near Pembury Woods is believed the ghost of men killed in a horrific explosion walked through the woods. Well, Pembury Woods is a notoriously haunted Welsh forest filled with ghosts and phantom ships. And if you go for a hike, don't be surprised if something grabs you. Hopefully it won't clutch your foot or ankle and cause you to fall. But if out of the corner of your eye you spot a shadowy figure that resembles a World War II airman, don't look directly at it or you may find yourself a victim of his rumored curse. And finally, for those who may be brave enough to spend the night, don't be surprised if you wake up the next morning and find all your pots, pans, and eating utensils thrown into the nearby trees. Well, from Europe, let's go to Indiana. Morgan Monroe State Forest in Bloomington, Indiana, covers about 24,000 acres, and it's the second largest state forest in Indiana. Comprised of abandoned farmland that locals found too rocky and hard to successfully grow crops on. In 1929, this region was made into a forest in order to prevent further erosion. It's now considered a mature hardwood forest and popular destination for hikers. Due to some unusual activity that takes place in it, it's also a popular destination for ghost hunters. Deep inside the lovely Morgan Monroe State Forest is the Steppe Cemetery. This desolate, half-forgotten resting place is at the end of a very narrow trail. Only about 32 identifiable graves there and a darkened, worn, and aged tree stump that resembles a chair. There's also a ghost that regularly haunts this tiny, desolate cemetery, been dubbed the Lady in Black because of her clothing. Diverse stories and legends circulate about the cause of the haunting, but the basic nature of the haunting still remains the same. On nights where the cemetery is lit by a full moon, people see a thin woman in black dress enter the cemetery and take a seat on that old chair-like stump. Some reported she sensed their presence, slowly rises from the darkened stump and turns to face them. And in some cases, she actually lunges for him. Hair is long and white, but this ghostly lady doesn't just look old enough to have white hair. A lot of folks assume her hair turned white as a result of a shocking tragedy. Folklore says while she was still alive, the Lady in Black used to sit in the cemetery and talk to her deceased loved ones as if they were still alive. People would encounter her in the forest, sitting on the same stump she seems to prefer even after death, carrying on a one-sided conversation. She'd then weep as the sun began to set in the sky, as if signaling the end of her loved ones' lives all over again. Anybody approaches her, she'd run into the forest and hide. A woman grief she felt after the loss. Some say it's her daughter, others say it's her husband, some say it was both. But apparently that grief hadn't lessened over the years. While not everybody encountering this phantom sees her take physical form, a lot of others reported hearing the heart-rendering sounds of her sobs and cries. Park rangers and local law enforcement have been called out to the cemetery many times to check on somebody in distress, only to find the cemetery empty. Well, the ghost of Lady in Black made her first appearance in the 1950s and been either seen or heard regularly since that time. Isn't the only ghost to haunt this forest cemetery, though. Imagine walking down the long, narrow dirt path that leads to Step Cemetery. Everything's quiet and normal, just like an ordinary hike. And as you get close enough to the cemetery to see the worn headstones, you catch sight of a young woman frantically digging at one of the graves with her bare hands. Well, of course, this is somewhat shocking, and you stand back, but things only get worse. Suddenly, the frantic digging stops. She becomes much more gentle and careful. You see her pull from the ground the remains of a small child, the tiny head peeking out beneath a deteriorating blanket. After a few moments of lovingly hugging and then rocking a tiny bundle, she puts the little one back into the ground, covering its remains with dirt, and disappears from sight. This young mother is another grieving spirit that remains near the cemetery. Locals state the body is a little girl who was killed in a tragic car accident back in the 1920s, from which the mother blamed herself. Sadly, she was unable to accept the loss or forgive herself for what happened. After her baby girl's death, she dug up the tiny body to hold it one last time and committed suicide in the cemetery. Her body was found next to the child's grave, near where she was buried shortly after that. Her grief and self-inflicted guilt have continued beyond death into the afterlife, it would seem. There are also reports of a black, muscular phantom dog that faithfully guards the grave of a small child within the cemetery. Paranormal groups have investigated in the area and successfully captured electronic voice phenomena within the confines of the cemetery and photographs of orbs. Step Cemetery is considered a paranormal hotspot. A lot of folks say there's another haunted area inside the Morgan Monroe State Forest. The Draper Cabin is reportedly haunted, although not all who spend the night there experience anything particularly chilling. Cabin was built about 100 years ago and has been described as very rustic, with slide bolts and a padlock on the doors to discourage inhabitants or intruders. Some hikers have had unpleasant things happen when they tried to spend the night inside its walls. These visitors reported a strong sense of being watched, so strong that they've been certain somebody else was in the cabin with them. But they haven't been able to find anybody within that sparsely furnished one-room cabin. They've been awakened by the sounds of round footsteps tramping across the floor. While nobody in the group was walking, and again, nobody else was found inside the cabin. Feeling of dread and general uneasiness keeps some people from remaining inside that cabin. So if you choose to pay a visit to the Morgan Monroe State Forest and are looking for some ghosts, pay a visit to the Step Cemetery and the Draper Cabin. Chances are you're going to hear and see or feel something that'll leave you quite anxious. But just remember to be respectful of the cemetery, because its residents are apparently still quite active. Well, from Bloomington, Indiana, let's go to Chatham County in North Carolina. Bear Creek, to be specific. Within the otherwise unassuming forested area near Bear Creek, North Carolina, there's one specific plot of ground known by name from its many paranormal circles. It's known as the Devil's Tramping Ground. Consists of a circle of ground about 40 feet in diameter, barren of all plant life, with nothing growing in this isolated spot for hundreds of years. Attempts have been made to plant seeds, but to no avail, and transplanting vegetation dies almost immediately, as if the ground repels anything living. Some legends abound about why this spot's so barren, and some are more believable than others, of course. The best-known urban legend, which also gives this paranormal hotspot its name, is the Devil's Tramping Ground. This tale, going back hundreds of years to early settlers in the area, states the devil rises at night to walk in a circle at this very spot as he plans his evil activities for the following day. And while this story may sound a bit fantastic, simply too many odd occurrences in the forest for its paranormal nature to be ignored. These strange, mysterious stories date back to the time period of the U.S. Revolutionary War, the late 1700s. Objects left within the confines of this barren circle have been found elsewhere the next day. Now, this may not be surprising for small items left within this lifeless ring, but how about larger items? Consider, if you will, the case of a group of Boy Scouts who decided to camp out, pitched their tents inside the circle, and settled in for the night. When they woke up the next morning, the Boy Scout troop, tents, and all their belongings were grouped together just as they had been left, but in a totally different part of the forest. Nobody was awake during this inexplicable transplant. There's another incident where a pair of brave souls decided to camp in the circle overnight, determined to find out what was really taking place during the darkness. They were determined to stay awake and take necessary measures to ensure that they would. But unfortunately for them, their bid was unsuccessful. They both reported during the night, I heard a soft voice begin to sing and lulled them into a deep sleep. They woke up the next day, 2 miles away from the circle. More fortunate than others who tried that same experiment. Locals claim some campers who try to remain within a circle overnight lose their sanity in the process. Others who brave the devil's tramping ground have been unable to stay awake at night. They report mysterious shadowy forms that look human along the nearby tree line. Now, these weren't mere shadows, but seemed to be sentient entities that walked back and forth at the edge of the trees in a disciplined, deliberate manner. Although they were a bit threatening, they never entered the camp, at least while the campers were awake. A lot of dogs and other animals sensed danger around the circle and refused to go near it, much less go in it. Dogs will resist while barking and growling and crying out as if in pain. And if they're brought closer to the circle, they'll tuck their tail and dig in their heels, desperate to avoid contact with this dead zone. They refuse to enter the circle, aware of something their unsympathetic handlers are not aware of. And there's one other, maybe more plausible explanation for this lifeless circle and the strange things that happen in it. Said this plot of land was the site of a terrible battle where a lot of Native Americans lost their lives. So much blood was spilled it changed the chemical nature of the soil so nothing would ever grow there again. That would certainly account for the type of activity reported as well as the continued lack of vegetation. Some say it's almost as if the land itself is cursed to be void of all life, maybe because of the many lives taken upon it. There's also a disturbing connection to the lost colony of Roanoke, where the only indication of what happened there was the word Croatoan carved in a tree. Some locals claim this barren patch of land is the grave of a Native American chief named Croatoan. It does make sense. People camping on the grave of a Native American chief would have something unpleasant occur during the stay. I can't talk. Most would say they were lucky the worst things happening is being mysteriously moved to a new location. So if you decide to visit the forest near Bear Creek, watch your step, be careful where you decide to camp out for the night, or might find yourself and your things somewhere else in the morning. Let's face it, don't take chances where an Indian burial ground may be involved. You know, there are a lot of tales of hauntings that are not in their own enough to justify an entire story. At least we've carefully edited and combined a lot of stories for our podcast. Let's go to Canada. Miramichi Forest in Blackville, New Brunswick, Canada. A young Irishman named Ryan worked as a lumber camp cook in the late 1800s. Brought his meager possessions with him, including his money belt that contained all his money, which wasn't a whole lot, to be perfectly frank. One day, while the lumberjacks were gone, the camp boss murdered Ryan and stole his money belt. When the lumber crew returned to the camp, immediately missed Ryan, and the camp boss informed them that Ryan had mysteriously taken ill and died. So they took the boss's word for it, but doubts began to arise that night when terrible yells echoed from the forest. Now, due to a heavy storm, they'd been forced to bury young Ryan in a shallow grave inside the Miramichi Forest. Lumberjacks almost went insane due to the horrific howling and yelling that night. Now, lumberjacks are normally brave to a fault, but these were so unnerved and terrified they abandoned the lumber camp the next morning. Well, he doesn't rest in peace. His ghost has been nicknamed the Dungarvan Whooper, after the river that flows nearby and the haunting whooping noises that Ryan reportedly makes to this day. And ever since his untimely death, there have been reports of yelling coming from the Miramichi Forest. A lot of folks believe Ryan is determined his murder is not going to be forgotten. And future attempts to log in the area have not been successful because of Ryan's continued howls. Eventually, the howling got to be such a problem, a local Roman Catholic priest named Father Murdoch attempted a blessing at what's believed to be Ryan's gravesite at Whipper Springs. It seems, though, that the yelling and screaming has continued, so apparently that blessing didn't have a great deal of impact. On that note, we come to the end of today's show and the end of the week. We'll be back Monday, and once again, you'll be listening to Ken Hudnall and the Ken Hudnall Show. Until then, have a truly great weekend.